Well, hello, everybody. My name is Tim Wuchter. I'm Director of Foundation Relations in University Advancement. I've been in that role and related roles here at the university for about 17 years and have done this type of work at other universities for another 5 or 6. So I'd like to talk today about foundations. Mainly my focus is on the big national foundations, but our office covers community foundations, smaller family foundations, and others, and also corporate work. So basically, this is what we do in our office. We're located in the stadium, 3rd floor, and we work with corporations and foundations nationwide to really try to build relationships at the university level for programs and projects. And we have points of contact at each of these corporations and foundations that we typically work with. In corporations, they're typically called key executives, foundation leadership and program staff, and we try to maintain those relationships. I typically work with more senior level leadership at the foundations, do work a little bit with the program officers, but when I travel to the foundations, it's typically with the president or the provost or a dean. And what we try to do is really cement that relationship at that level with the expectation that if we're maintaining that level of relationship, then we'll be able to bring faculty into the conversation for them to have those lower level conversations with the program officers and start building those foundational relationships which are so critical and which will hopefully lead to invitations for proposals and subsequent funding. We also work with alumni that are at these corporations and foundations, and this is very important from our perspective because these individuals, they can serve as advocates for us particularly within corporations, and help us shepherd proposals through and get them to the right person or persons for review. We monitor Tier 1 corporate and foundation funder interests, and we work very closely with Doug's office, Vice President Chu's office, Business Connect, to help develop fundable proposals to go out the door. And we also review e-transmittals for all foundation proposals. So any faculty member that's submitting a research proposal to a foundation, I'm typically included on that e-transmittal so that I'm aware of the proposal as it goes out the door. And I would typically review the abstract and the budget. And 99% of the time, I certainly clear them all. I have no problem with that. The only time we may consider holding back is if the university is in discussions with, let's say, Rockefeller Foundation on a major 7 or 8 figure ask. We may ask you to hold off until that cycles through because we wouldn't want to jeopardize that. In the 17 some years that I've been here, I think we've only declined 3 or 4 to go forward, and that was just for a short period of time until another proposal cycled through. So a lot of times we're viewed as gatekeepers. We're not gatekeepers. We're not here to thwart any of the research ideas or proposals that you're putting out the door. And again, the only time we may come back to you and ask you to hold off a little bit is in that scenario that I just related. So this is who we are. We have grown considerably. When I started at the university in 1999 or so, there were just 2 of us in this office, Lucille Fallon, our executive director, and me. So you can see how we've grown over the years. And I think this is a shout out to administration at the university to really see the value that we can bring and the opportunity that's out there in the corporate and foundation sector to provide the resources for our office to grow. So in our central office, besides our executive director and me, we have 4 associate directors, and you can see what their focus areas are. We have an associate director that works very closely with me on national level foundations, mainly looking at what I call the Tier 2 level foundations. So the ones I work with are Gates, Ford, Rockefeller, and the larger ones. Brad Ricker, he focuses on key industries on the corporate side for agriculture, food, pharmaceutical, transportation, insurance. Patty Althoff, key industries, manufacturing, retail, automotive, entertainment, consumer products, and technology. And Larry Wallach, he focuses exclusively on the state of Michigan, foundations and corporations within the state of Michigan, with the exception of the 3 national foundations, Kellogg, Kresge, and Mott. I would work with them. And then we also have a number of CFR people out in the colleges where there's significant opportunity for corporate and foundation work. So in Ag and Natural Resources, the Road College of Business, the College of Engineering, and International Studies and Programs. And I encourage you, if you are in any of those 4 colleges, to get to know that person within your college, because they can work very closely with you and liaise back to my office. So each of the colleges, as you probably know, has a development office within that particular college, and the development directors in that college work with mainly alumni and individuals, but they do have corporate and foundation as part of their purview, and they can assist you in some preliminary discussions on a project that you may have an interest in, and they would be the liaison to my office. So I encourage you, if you have a project you want to talk about, that's your first point of contact, is the development person within your college, and then that person will bring somebody from my office into the conversation if it gets to that level. And I included this slide just in case you don't know who your development people are within your college. So each of the colleges and units has a development person or persons. Many of the larger colleges have 4 or 5 development people on staff. So I'd like to throw in a couple slides like this just to give you a sense of the foundation world. 86,000 foundations out there back in 2012, and new ones are added every year. So you can see that it's a huge, huge sector and a lot of opportunity. Some of the figures on the foundation giving over the years, you can see it's risen almost steadily each year, and trends are indicating that it will continue on that upward cycle. And these are just some of the various types of foundations. A lot of faculty members, when I talk to them, some don't realize there are different levels or different types of foundations out there. And I think it's important to know that, because the project that you may have an interest in may be more aligned with a community foundation or a family foundation than one of the big national foundations. So I'd like to include this slide just to give you a sense of what these different types of foundations are. So for example, family foundations, there's a plethora of them out there, and many of them tend to be just husband and wife who decided to start their own family foundation. So a lot of times you will not see well-defined program areas for a family foundation. You won't see program staff. And it's very difficult sometimes to break into these conversations, and that's where a lot of times the individual development director in your office is the better person to have these types of conversations, particularly if it's a husband and wife and they are alums of the college. So a lot of times the work with the family foundations are really driven by our individual giving officers, and we are brought into the conversation if we need to be. Community foundations within the state of Michigan, we're blessed because we have a community foundation, I believe, in just about every county, if not every county. The trick with community foundations is they are very geographic focused. So you need to be thinking about, if you're doing a project in Kent County, maybe the Grand Rapids Community Foundation might have an interest. You wouldn't approach them if you're doing something in Southeast Michigan. So very geographic focused, very community focused. So going to them for a pure research project is probably not something you'd want to consider. But if you're doing something with a community-based organization within a community, then I think you might be able to garner some support from the community foundations. There are a number of operating foundations out there. These are kind of interesting characters. They tend to have their own programs. Many times they're raising money themselves. They're not typically looked at as a grant-making foundation. However, there are opportunities if you can align with some of the interests that they are working on and they bring you on as a partner. There may be some opportunity to get funding for a project that you're working on with them jointly. But looking at them as a strict grant-making organization, I would say probably not the route to go. And then the big national foundations, which I'm sure everybody in the room is familiar with, these are large, complex, multifaceted. They typically have multiple program areas, and the university oftentimes has proposals and engagement with a number of those program areas. I'm thinking of the Gates Foundation. Our main point of contact there is with their agricultural development program, but we have a lot of going on with their education group and also with their global health group as well. So they usually have very well-defined areas of focus, and the program staff at these organizations tend to be very well versed in their area of expertise. Many of them are PhDs, and most of them tend to know the key people at the major universities, and they source those individuals. So I've noticed over the years that it's getting more and more difficult just to submit cold proposals to these major foundations. A lot depends on relationship building. A lot depends on, excuse me, who they know at a university, who they've kept in contact with, and who you're making contact with as you're going out there and presenting at conferences and symposia. And that's a very good way to get on the radar screen of some of these big foundations, because a lot of times they send their program officers to these conferences. A lot of times they're presenting. And if you're there and you're presenting, it's a great way for them to get to know the research that you're working on and to potentially have some side conversations and start developing relationships with them. Proposals at the big foundations are typically invited. Again, sending in a cold proposal is probably not the best route to go. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but to be successful, I think there's a lot of behind the scenes work that should be done before submitting that proposal. And many of them issue RFPs. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for example, almost exclusively works on the RFP basis. You can get funding from them for other project support, but they tend to prefer working through their RFPs. These are some of the top foundations. No surprise, Bill and Melinda Gates at the top of the list there for both total assets and total giving, followed by Ford, and just gives you a sense of the top foundations in the US. And I thought this was an interesting slide. This is by issue, what they're funding. So the top area of interest for the most foundations is the health area, followed by education. And then you can see, unfortunately, social sciences down on the bottom there. Foundation funding domestically, top funder is the Kellogg Foundation right here in the state, followed by Robert Wood Johnson and Ford. And the map of the US shows you the areas that are getting the most funding. And unfortunately, we're not in one of the top areas for getting the most funding from these major foundations. We're at 19%. No surprise that the Northeast is the top. I was a bit surprised that the South is the second. I thought the West would be the second with the major foundations on the West Coast. Funding internationally, again, I think no surprises here. Gates Foundation at the top of the list, and Sub-Saharan Africa getting most of the funding, a major area that the university has been engaged in for many years, and it reflects in the funding that we've been getting from the Gates Foundation. The total funding from Gates to the university is in excess of $50 million, and the bulk of that has gone to mainly our work in Sub-Saharan Africa from the Global African Development, Agriculture Development Program. So what are the funding interests of the big national foundations? I divide it into two. There's a group of foundations that mainly focus on awards and competitions, and these are mainly research-based, and then what I call program project grants. So those foundations that are looking at awards and competitions, they're very research-focused, and most of these foundations have these awards and competitions on an annual basis. So we know when they're coming out, and we have an opportunity to think a year in advance where we might want to go as far as nominating faculty members for some of these. There's a strong emphasis across the board on early career faculty. Not all of the awards are geared to early career, but a good portion of them are. So if you're a junior level faculty member, some of these might be of interest to you. They typically have very specific eligibility requirements that we need to meet in order for a nomination to go forward. And their focus tends to be on the sciences, engineering, and medical disciplines. Very competitive, expert review panels, and most of them tend to be institutionally limited, and they are managed through Doug's office. I work with Doug on some of these, but ultimately they're managed through his office, and the nominations are put forth through his office. And his website, which I'm sure he will talk about, has those listed. So these are the major foundations that tend to have annual awards and competitions. I'm sure many of you are familiar with some of these. And we try to nominate faculty members for most of these on an annual basis, and work with the faculty members in helping them put together their applications. I know this is hard to see, but I'm sure this presentation will be on the website that you can go to and see this a lot clearer. And I believe Doug puts a lot of this information on his website as well. But for 2016-17, these are the awards and competitions. And what I've done, I've provided the deadlines, whether they're limited or not with a yes or no in that third column, the amount, and just a general description of what the program is. So I encourage you to either look at this document or Doug's website, where some of these, or most of these probably, are listed. And then a few others which I didn't do any annotations on, but these are some other foundations that do awards and competitions. And I just wanted to put them out there so you're aware of them, because some of them are a little bit different, such as Greenwall, focusing on bioethics, Concern Foundation on cancer, Damon Runyon on cancer, Whitehall on the life sciences, Thrasher on children's health, pediatrics. So I think there's opportunity with some of these foundations. I haven't seen a lot of proposals go out the door for some of these, so these might be some you and your fellow faculty members want to take a closer look at. I did say that most of these awards and competitions are focused on medical and the sciences and engineering. The ones that come to mind that are not in that area are the Mellon Foundation, which is focused on humanities, their New Directions Fellowship. William T. Grant Foundation, most of their awards are in the social sciences and education. So there are some that go outside of the traditional engineering, sciences, and medical fields. Then the other type of grants available from these larger foundations are program and project grants. And again, this is a lot of what I talked about earlier in the conversation. But a couple things I want to point out here is that grantees are more often sourced by these foundations rather than the individual cold submissions. I think that's important to remember. And again, how do you get on the radar screen of some of these foundations? What I'm hearing from program staff and leadership at the foundations is, again, you need to be visible. The university needs to be visible, not only at major conferences and symposia where foundation reps are present, but also we need to be proactive in getting the word out. And I think we are doing that through through CABs and getting research awards out there and stories about them. I know Doug's and Steve's office lists some things on their website about various awards that faculty members have gotten. So the more we can publicize that, I think the more we will get on the radar screen of some of these larger foundations and have greater opportunity. The other key thing I think we need to remember is these big foundations are really interested in supporting national level or international level projects. It would be very difficult to interest a Ford Foundation or a Rockefeller Foundation on a project that's really locally focused here in Lansing or in Detroit or even within the state of Michigan, unless you could show that there is the potential for significant national impact at some point down the road, or that the project or the program might be replicable in other areas of the country or around the world. So again, that's why I put that other slide in there at the beginning to indicate that there are other opportunities. If you're having a much more local or regional type project, it might not be the best route to look or spend your time trying to do something with a national foundation. You might have better success looking at some of the more local, regionalized foundations with here in the state of Michigan. And the other thing that we've noticed over the years that's been a change is that a lot of these major foundations are moving more and more toward funding NGOs and advocacy groups, community-based organizations, intermediary groups, then the intermediary group then re-grants some of that funding. So there's been this shift over the years from heavily focused on funding colleges and universities to moving more and more away from that to funding these other types of organizations. Now, that's not to say they're not funding colleges and universities, they are. But what I think we need to be thinking about as a university is, okay, how can we play in this new kind of space that these foundations are playing in? And one of the things I think we need to be very cognizant of is who we might be able to partner with. What NGOs are working in the space that we're working in, or advocacy groups that we could partner with and maybe go in for co-funding. Okay? We know that maybe Gates is funding a major NGO in Africa that's working on a particular area, all right? And okay, how can we as faculty members maybe align with that NGO and get some of the funding that Gates is providing that organization? Albeit it would be more or less as a subcontract, not a direct fund, but it's still money coming from the foundation for work that you want to do. And I think we're going to see more and more of that. So partnerships, collaboration is critical, I think, in my view, going forward. And for international projects, a lot of foundations are moving more and more to funding in-country partners. Again, if you're doing international work, I think it's critical to think about who you could partner with in country. We are trying, making a concerted effort now to establish relationships with the in-country offices of many of these big national foundations. So Rockefeller has Africa-based offices, Ford Foundation, MacArthur, Gates, and others. And our Senior Director of Development in International Studies and Programs, Annika Childress, that's part of her charge, is to try to build those relationships and understand what those in-country offices are working on and how we might align with them. Because for us, again, to really get on the radar screen of some of these big foundations, we need to have the backing of the in-country office for work that we're doing in country. So if we're doing something in Nigeria that aligns with the Ford Foundation's office in Nigeria, and we have that office backing us, then it's much easier to present the case to the Board of Trustees here in New York City at the Ford Foundation to fund that particular project. Without the backing of that in-country office, it's much more challenging. So that's what we're trying to do now, is try to build those relationships so that we have a much greater impact in some of the projects that we're doing in Africa, Southeast Asia, India, and other parts of the world. Before I get to the affinity groups, the other thing I wanted to mention for the international work, many of you probably are familiar with the Office of International Research Collaboration in International Studies and Programs. That's a great resource. They have a website as well that publishes grant opportunities. It's on a weekly basis, and if you go to their website, you can sign up for that, and there's a handout in the back of the room if you want to take that on their shop. So, final slide, affinity groups. These are groups of foundations that have come together around specific themes, around specific issues. And they meet once, twice a year for annual discussions on where their grant making might go in, for instance, the environment or health, technology, peace and security. They typically do not invite outsiders, so to speak, to participate in any of those conferences because they don't want to be inundated with people like us asking them for money. This is their chance to sit down with their peers and talk about where they, as a sector, want to go on African grant making or environmental grant making. That being said, oftentimes they bring in experts for some of these annual meetings to talk generally about what's happening in, let's say, literacy or peace and security. And we've had a number of faculty members that have been invited to attend some of these closed meetings to present, not to talk about their projects and ask for funding, but just to talk in general and inform these foundations about where their programming could go. This is a wonderful way to get on the radar screen of some of these organizations. So again, how does that happen? They got to get to know you. Sorry, this is the final slide. This is a grant proposal planning guide that our office has put together and has been it's been modified somewhat over the years, but it gives faculty members an idea of the types of questions that any foundation program officer will ask. So if the development director in your college is meeting with you, or I'm meeting with you, or one of my colleagues is meeting with you, we may ask you to take a look at this and see if you can answer the questions on it. And if you can't really address all of the questions on here, maybe we're not ready to have that conversation with the foundation, or you're not ready at this point to prepare the proposal and send it out the door. So this is a tool that faculty members can use. I think it's been successful over the years. It allows you to focus on what any foundation would be looking for in a proposal or a conversation. And I think it's something that that could help and guide you in your thinking as you're moving forward with ideas for proposals. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.